Good morning and welcome to Overdivest Nurseries. It's a beautiful sunny day in midsummer. Yes, it's a little on the toasty side, but I suppose that's why they call it the dog days of summer. Anyway, here in the nursery, this is where we grow our plants that we send out to hundreds of garden centres that are located right throughout our region. That's the Mid-Atlantic and Northeastern states, places that carry all of these beautiful plants, ones that have been trialled and tested and are available for us to be able to grow in our gardens throughout the region. And today in this video, I'm going to take you and show you some fantastic varieties of these gorgeous, big, exotic, tropical looking flowers. These are, of course, Perennial Hibiscus. Now, if you're a returning subscriber, welcome back. Thank you for joining us today. But if you're a new viewer and this is your first time to come to our channel, I'd like to invite you to think about subscribing, because once you're subscribed to the channel, you'll find that as we publish new videos like this one, which we're doing all the time, they will turn up automatically in your feed. And if it turns out that you happen to like what we're showing you and telling you about, it would be great if you could hit the like button too, and perhaps even think about sharing it with some of your gardening friends too. That way they'll be able to keep up together with all of the exciting things that are going on in the plant world and be able to perhaps enjoy some of these fabulous plants as well. Now, when we think about summer, of course, it's the time when we tend to spend most of our time outdoors, whether it's early in the morning or into the long summer evenings, relaxing on the patio, on a balcony, perhaps even by the swimming pool, or just going for a stroll around your garden, or even just walking up to your front door. It's really important to have lots of good colour in the garden that's dependable and reliable and easy to grow and enjoy. And guess what? These perennial hibiscus do all of that. And what's more, they actually thrive in summer conditions. They love the sun, the heat and humidity that we get at this time of year. And that's what makes them so valuable for us to be able to have in the garden, when sometimes in the middle of the summer, with all of that oppressive heat and conditions, some other things might be struggling a little bit. These plants, on the other hand, really, as you see, revel in those conditions. And that's because these hybrids are descended from native species, species that are ideally equipped to be able to deal with our summer conditions. They love the sunshine, they love the heat, they actually like the humidity there. And what's interesting is that there's about 6 or 7 species involved in the makeup of some of these hybrids. And of course, the essence of any good hybrid is to be able to take the best qualities, the best merits and genetic traits of each of the parents and combine it into a plant that has outstanding garden performance. And with these hybrids, that's exactly what we're getting. Now, out of those 6 or 7, there's one species called Hibiscus mosquitus, which is found all the way from Maine right down to Florida. It's a very hardy plant, zone 4, so it'll grow anywhere in our region, and that is transmitted into their progeny. Out of that then combines some of the genetic traits of other ones, which means that often with these you get a very free flowering habit, a nice, strong, well-branching habit. Also, you get this shorter, compact form and these large overlapping petals, and sometimes even with some of them really, really pretty foliage too. So that means that today modern plant breeders have been able to really take all of those merits and combine them into plants that are able to cope very well with our weather conditions and actually perform well right now in the middle of the summer. And that's what makes them so valuable for our gardens at this time of year. But before we get into all of that, let me remind you that elsewhere here on this channel, we already have several videos featuring exciting varieties. Ones like this one here, which is Holy Grail with its dark blood red flowers. Also, what about this one? Perfect Storm with its lovely pink and a bright red eye. And then there's French Vanilla, which is this one, which has this lovely custard, creamy, yellowy colored one with, again, a lovely red eye. And then probably one of the most noticeable, even when it's not in flower, this particular one here with its lovely variegated foliage. It's called Summer Carnival. So those are already there, and you're welcome to perhaps take a few minutes after you view this video and you'll be able to catch more about those and other ones that we have on this channel too. But today it's the Summerific series from Proven Winners that I want to make sure you know about. There's several varieties within the series, and in the next few minutes I'm going to take you through and show you some of the ones that are looking really good now in the nursery. Ones like this gorgeous variety here that's called Cherry Chocolate. Here is one that grows about 4 foot high by about 4 foot wide with this beautiful foliage, as you see, which has a bronzy purplish shade and lovely red veinings on leaves that look a little bit like a maple shaped leaf. Then when you look at the flowers here, you'll see that they carry these enormous big wide flowers here that can be as much as 8 to 9 inches or so across. And look into the center and you'll see why it's got its name. Look at this bright cherry red eye in the middle of each of these highly impressive flowers. Then look at this lovely soft pink color, and then look at how these bright red, raspberry red veins spread out from them. And also you notice how all of these petals are overlapping, and also they come with a good heavy substance. That's what makes this an impressive variety. But there's one more thing that's important to mention about these Summerific hybrids, and that is that these flower all the way from the bottom of the plant right up to the top. They're called indeterminate flowering varieties, and as you see from this flower now, look, you see they're also very popular with pollinators too. But anyway, getting back to the fact that they flower all the way up the stem. You see, the old-fashioned perennial ones used to flower up at the tops of the shoots, and they'd carry all their flowers up at the top and nothing down below. But these varieties, when they're growing in the landscape, will carry flowers from the base of the plant right through the middle and up onto the crown of the plant. And as you see from these plants here, they're still making lots of flower bud, and they will keep going quite literally for 6 weeks or more, certainly well into the autumn time. Now, they make terrific plants, obviously, for creating a focal spot somewhere in the garden. So if you're looking to have something that's going to have all of these big flowers, that's going to say, look at me, then of course these are going to be perfect for that. And if you wanted to create a mass effect like this, then at the back or middle of a bed or a border, they're going to be very effective. And you might also think about using these as a kind of seasonal screen as well, because you see they'll grow up and produce plants that will be about this size or so, and so they'll be impressive during the main part of the season. That's during the summertime and into the fall, and then they're herbaceous, they die back, so they're not going to be showing up above the ground during the winter or early part of the spring. But for the main part of the growing season, they're definitely going to be very impressive. And another thing I want to suggest that you think about doing, and that is that you might think about growing some of these in containers. You see, they love to have plenty of moisture at the roots. So if you're somebody who's always worried about overwatering your plants, well, guess what? With these, you don't need to worry about that, because the more water you give them, the more they're going to enjoy it. So therefore, you just do not have to worry about overwatering these if you're wanting to grow them in containers. And another thing you might think about, and that is planting them alongside pathways and driveways. You see, all of these plants are vegetatively reproduced, which means that they are genetically identical, and therefore if you're planting them out, say in a line alongside a driveway, they should produce a very nice uniform effect. And if you were to ask me about the ideal growing conditions for them, I would tell you that just an average free draining garden soil will be perfectly fine as long as it's rich and plenty of organic matter. And that's why amending the soil with organic matter, planting compost, things like that is very important. Now, ideally, they like to be on the slightly acid side of neutral. Somewhere about 5.5 to 6 is ideal. But as long as you don't have extremes at either end, I think you'll find they'll do perfectly well for you. But also, one thing I would say is that, as you see here, they love growing in plenty of sunlight. They will grow in some partially shaded situations, but there you'll find that they'll grow up and be more open and rank and perhaps spread out and splay out and become floppy. So keep them out in a sunny location and also plenty of moisture at the roots, and that's really all you need to do. I would also suggest that you keep the watering can or a hose handy too, because if you get into any dry periods, they will really love it if you can really give them a little extra water. They'll put up with short periods of drought if they have to, but if you get into a prolonged dry period, you'll notice that the growth will be more stunted. The bottom leaves might start to turn yellow, and they're more likely to abort some of the flower buds too, which of course would be a shame. So getting out and giving them a good deep watering will definitely pay dividends and keep them growing, as you see, nice and lush and luxuriant and producing all of these gorgeous flowers. And if you're wondering how to look after them, that's pretty easy as well, because there really isn't a whole lot that needs doing. You'll notice that the flowers here, impressive as they are, will only last a couple of days. And then behind it are all these flower buds, which of course keep coming, and that's what keeps the colour going for such a long time. But because the flowers only last a couple of days, they're not very good for cut flowers, because then of course the period is too short. But you will also notice that when the flowers begin to go over, that most of these varieties are self-cleaning. That is, that the flowers drop off. But sometimes after rain, the old flower heads might persist here, and so what I like to do is, just really for aesthetic reasons, is to go through and just pick off the old flowers, because if you get rainy weather, sometimes the old flowers will persist on the foliage, and certainly here where we're watering our plants with overhead irrigation, they tend to persist on the leaves, and while it doesn't do the plant any harm, it just doesn't keep it as fresh and colourful looking as we would like. The only other thing that I would say about looking after them is to give them a prune in the very early part of the season, just before they start to grow out. You see, these are herbaceous perennials. They die back, they're dormant during the winter time, and it's important to remind you that these are one of the last perennials to emerge in springtime. Usually all the other perennials are up and sprouting and starting to grow, while these are still lying dormant in the soil. But sprout and grow they will. So if you've got a new one in the garden and you're wondering whether it's dead or not, leave it, because in a couple of weeks it will obviously grow up and come out. Before that happens, however, you can go in and cut back the old stems to about 3 or 4 inches. Now the stems are fairly woody at the base and fairly thick too, so you'll probably need a pair of loppers or perhaps a saw to cut them back, and then from the crown the new growth will emerge. And outside of that, that's really all you need to do. Oh, and I should mention also that they don't really need deadheading. And what I tend to do is to leave the old seed heads on here, because then little birds will come in and feed on those. So it's great to have that added benefit so that they can enjoy them as well as ourselves. And remember how I was telling you about they're descended from the rose mallow, the swamp rose mallow? Well, guess what? If you have a damp spot somewhere in your garden, it might be the side of a pond or a stream, or maybe a bog garden or a rain garden or anything like that, they will be absolutely at home in those sorts of situations too. And this gorgeous little variety here is one that really catches your eye because of, look at all the flowers that it's producing. This is Summerific Candy Crush. The flowers, as you see, are not quite as wide, but what it loses a little bit in size is still very impressive. It makes up for in sheer quantity of flower bud that it's producing here, all the way up from the base of the plant through to the tops. And then, if your tastes are like mine, and you really love growing the softer pastel shades, then take a look at this gorgeous selection. This is ballet slippers. Now here's one that, as you see, has these absolutely gorgeous flowers that have really just an exquisite coloring, I think. White. But then look to the edges of the petals and you'll see that it's got this lovely kind of soft pink as it comes out towards the edges, and again a cherry raspberry red eye right in the middle of the flowers. And then, in total contrast, let me take you across the driveway here to show you this showstopper. This is Hibiscus Summerific Valentine's Crush. Very well named. For look at these bright red flowers, true red. When you think about it, there aren't really that many plants that have true red. You get purpley coloured ones, maroony coloured ones, ones with different shades of red. But look at this. This is like fire engine red, and that's a plant that really stops you in your tracks and makes you pay attention. Hybridized fairly recently in 2018 and then introduced a few years after that. This is another very good example of the sterling work that Hans Hansen and his talented team of hybridizers at Walter's Gardens in Zeeland, Michigan are doing. This is undoubtedly a major breakthrough in producing bright red, bushy, compact, free-flowering, hardy hibiscus. And this is another variety here too. But first of all, I'm wondering, am I showing you too many? Have you time to stick with me for another few minutes? Because this variety here, called Spinderella, is definitely one that I think you'll probably want to take a look at too. Just look at these absolutely beautiful flowers here. Look at the way the petals overlap. Look at the shading of it, this lovely pink shading, and also very interestingly, as well as having this cherry raspberry red eye in the center of it, look at the veins here and you'll see that instead of being red and colored like previous ones, these are white. So it helps to give the plant a more ruffled effect. And if you stand back and look at these flowers, you'll see that they look like whirligigs, which of course is where the name Spinderella comes from. It grows into a good size, about 4.5 by about 5 foot wide or thereabouts. So it's nice and bushy and grows into a rounded, dense plant, and that's what helps it put on such a good show, like most of these varieties. Now, I was thinking a little while ago that perhaps I'm showing you too many varieties, making these videos a little too long, but I'm reminded of a comment we've seen a little while ago from a viewer that said that she goes back and visits the videos quite frequently and reviews them. And so if you're a little pushed on time, that would be something perhaps that you could do. The idea of this is to try and let you see what's likely to be turning up in your local garden centres, so that when you go in to see the plants in reality, then you're already kind of pre-alerted as to the ones that maybe you would want to take a look at. And this is interesting because all of the varieties that I've been showing you to date have had green or slightly purpley tinted foliage. Look at the foliage on this gorgeous variety here. Look how it's dark and purple and makes a very nice show even if it wasn't flowering. And what's interesting is that Hans and his talented team have really expanded upon the work, the valuable work of three brothers in Lincoln, Nebraska. They were the Fleming brothers, Bob, Jim, and Dave. And over 40 years of crossing native species and back crossing and selecting, they managed to perfect really hardy, think of Lincoln, Nebraska, really hardy varieties, but also ones that had purple foliage like this. Now they were, I believe, small in stature. They were only about 5'6", but giants when it come to breeding and selecting plants. And now Hans and his team have taken that breeding work a stage further by adding in this beautiful, bright, glowing, hot pink color that contrasts so beautifully with the purple foliage, and that's what makes this variety so special. This is Hibiscus Summerific Evening Glow, well named too. So congratulations for sticking with me to this point. Now if you've watched any of the other videos that I've filmed before, you'll see that I usually save my favorite plants to the end. And now I'm going to take you all the way to the end of the bed to show you my favorite out of all of these varieties. And this is what I'm talking about. Just look at this little beauty. This is Summerific Edge of Night. Now here's a variety that only grows about 3.5 foot high, spreads out to be slightly wider. We'll get out to about 4.5 foot or so wide. But look at the detail of this plant. Short and compact and very bushy, with this very dark foliage that makes the perfect background to show off all of these gorgeous crinkly edge flowers that are still a good size. These are, even though it's a small compact plant, these are big flowers. They can be about 7 inches or so wide. And also, when you look into the middle of the plants here and see the amount of flower bud that these plants are carrying. It's also a little later in flowering, which is valuable because that helps to extend the flowering period too. And of course, with this really black, dark foliage, that, just like we talked about a minute or two ago, really adds a good deal of extra dimension to the garden. But I think this is a top quality plant that deserves literally a place in everybody's garden. This is Hibiscus Summerific Edge of Night, a really class, very hardy, easy to grow and thoroughly reliable perennial that I hope you get a chance to grow in your garden. This is David Wilson. Enjoy your gardening. It's good for us, and it's very good for our environment too.